Howdy folks, TJ here. I'm from Tenkara, USA, and we want to chat about what now? What now? What's that mean? Well, what does it mean? It means you just purchased your first Tenkara rod. You kind of get it and you go, okay, this looks interesting. There's a nice little case. What now? What do I do? Well, I want to give you some tips on things to do, tips on things not to do, recommendations, and just to kind of get your bearings straight for making this experience fun, easy, and just in the end, you'll go, okay, Tenkara can be simple. I don't need to overcomplicate things. So let's chat a little bit. The rod that we're going to actually show in this video is the Ukiyo. It's our newest rod that we just introduced in late 2023. So many of you may be opening this rod for the first time. So even if you're a seasoned pro with Tenkara, maybe this video will still be helpful. But it's kind of tailored at, you just purchased your first rod, it's arrived, what now? So the only thing I'm holding in my hand right now is the rod case. We're not even going to talk about lines. We're not going to talk about other things that could possibly complicate things. Even though Tenkara is simple, it's amazing how you can overcomplicate things by thinking too much about certain things. And I'm going to try to use I've been doing Tenkara for a long time now. So just use some tips and things to make this less complicated. So we're going to take out the starter kit from the equation if you happen to have purchased one, the lines. That will be for a future video. This is strictly going to be, okay, what now? The rod's arrived. What do you do next? I think it's important to get familiar with the rod before you do any of the other things like connecting a line to it and all of that. Now, you should have been doing your homework for a little while now while the rod was in transit to you. There's tons of free videos on our website, tenkarausa.com. If you go to the video page, you'll see that we've got videos that we've been making for about 14 years now that cover a lot of these things, a lot of the basics. So it's good if you're more of a visual person, watch some of these videos. Get familiar with what we're talking about. Line connection, how the rod works. Also, how to maintain a rod. These are telescopic devices. If you're dunking them in water all day long, you got to clean them up a little bit every once in a while. So we're going to kind of cover the rod has arrived. What do you do next? Okay, so what are we going to do? On the end of our rods, they tell you what rod model you have. This model is the Ukiyo or Ukiyo. You just unscrew the lid. I'm going to cover some of these things very basically, but this is the hard case that you can throw in the back of your Jeep, your Honda Civic, whatever you have. It protects the rod from throwing stuff on top of it. If you're like my wife and I, you start packing your vehicle and you throw stuff in. So it protects it for nice transit. So nice hard case. I've unscrewed the cap, tilt the rod a little down, and inside of the case will be a socked, it's going to roll off, a socked rod. The Ukiyo or Ukiyo, you can call it whatever you like. Ukiyo, Ukiyo. There's always two names for everything, right? Maybe three sometimes. So nice stretchy sock. And this protects it from getting scratched and dinged up if you're only carrying the socked rod. If you're a backpacker, somebody that's ultra light, you may not use the case that much. So put it in the sock, kind of gives it a little extra protection. A little slit on the side, just open up that slit, and you're starting to see what it is you just purchased. And I'm pulling out our newest rod, beautiful little blue wonder called the Ukiyo. And we've got our names all stamped on everything. So nice little rod. This is an ultralight rod, 14.5 inches when closed, under 2 ounces. So it's ultralight, it feels like you're casting a feather all day. Although you probably couldn't cast too well if it was a feather. So this is the rod. The Ukiyo should be coming with 2 plugs. One of them is an extra. If you don't have the Ukiyo and you have the Iwana or a different model, you won't have this little feature on everything. So this is generically trying to cover as many bases as we can. And I'm just covering the Ukiyo because it's our newest rod. If you have a rod model that comes with the keep your plug system, there may be an extra plug in the back that you can pull and hide this in some place that you'll remember in your glove compartment, at home, whatever it may be. It's an extra because you may lose the one that's on the top of the plug eventually. This is the same exact little plug, just on the top. This little red string is called Lillian, and it is there for backup in case you ever shred the Lillian, chop the Lillian, it starts tearing for whatever reason, a field fix. You may be able to utilize this material. But for now, it makes a nice little spot for you to grab and pull. Now you notice I'm holding the rod straight up or at mostly an angle pointing up. You do not want to, and this is tip number 1, hold the rod down and pull the plug, because everything is going to go grrr and fall out. You don't want to do that. So hold it upwards, pull the plug. This plug now, if you've got to keep your plug system rod, like the Ukiyo, Roto, Sato, Ito, those are the models that we have that have that. Little hole in the back that you can plug your plug into for safekeeping while you're fishing. Now, once you pull the plug, again, do not tilt downwards because everything's going to fly out and make a mess. You need to put your finger over the top and guide things out. So no Luke Skywalkers here. At trade shows, I always say, at this point, there's always that one person that goes, "Hunk," and everything flies out. You do not want to do the Luke Skywalker. If you need your little bit of Star Wars in your day, go watch the movie. With a Tenkara rod, slightly tip out and just show the tip. And what you're looking for is the red Lillian that's adhered to the tip of your rod. Guide it out. So that's why you're putting fingers over you. Putting fingers, shimming a little bit to show that Lillian material. Once you've got the tip, you now will start opening and put your fingers just like this. Guide it. And as you're pulling the segment out, it's going to naturally grab the next segment behind it. It's going to give a little resistance. Don't over pull. That's tip number 2. Don't over pull and tighten things up to where you're going to have a bear of a time closing it later. So just snug it up just enough. That's perfect. And then start extending each segment. It grabbed another one. These are very thin segments, so you're probably not seeing it, but it grabbed another one, and each one is going to start getting bigger. Now, I'm working in a 17 by 17 room here. This rod's about a little under 10 feet long, so I can only open so much. We'll see how much I can open. But guide it out with your fingers over here and just snug it up just a little bit as you're opening it. Now, the rod will naturally dead end. Maybe I'll move back a little bit. It's going to naturally... My videos are kind of... This is just me and you chatting. We're having a good time talking about Tenkara. So, anyway, as you continue opening, it will eventually dead end right there. The rod is now fully open, and I'm hitting the tip on the ceiling over here. So now I've got the rod fully opened. So when you're opening a Tenkara rod, you're always opening from the smallest segment first, working your way to the back of the handle. Do not open willy-nilly. If you've got a zoom model rod like the Sato or Roto, you don't want to start opening the zoom segments first, because if you do that and then start grabbing the tip, that tip's going to fly down and get stuck on you. So always, 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 smallest segment first, work your way to the back of the handle until it stops. I've now got a fully extended Ukiyo rod. When you're closing it, it's at the exact opposite. You will not close the tip first. You will not go in the middle of the rod and start closing first, because those segments will fall down and get wedged and stuck, and you're going to make a mess. So, tip number, is this on 3? Always exact opposite. You're pushing the larger segments back into the handle first. And again, if you don't over pull them, they're going to be easier to close later. They just need to be snugged up enough when you're opening them so they don't fall down, so you can fish the rod. When you're done for the day, close the nearest segment to the handle first. When it stops, you'll hear a dead end on the end. And this little noise, I call this a gnip-gnop. Right here, you see there's some resistance. If you just do this and push it in, it will close. If the segment's a little tight, sometimes you can hold it. Always hold close to the seam when you're closing or opening things. Just go like this. Just a little gnip-gnop, and it will help you close the rod if it's a little tight. If not tight, just push it down like I'm doing here. As you get to these thinner components, do not hold up high. Tip number 4. If you're holding up high and you're pushing and you're bending, you may break the rod. So do not do that. Always hold close to the seam where you're opening or closing things. So just you'll see it's only an inch or 2 above. Just push it down. As you work your way to these skinny pieces, again, don't hold up here. You're going to break something. Hold it down here, and you'll see it goes in buttery smooth. And when you get to the end, the tip's just going to fall back in. your rod's now closed. The plug, again, don't lean it down until you put the plug on. It may seem like basic things, but it's amazing how often people will forget. I'll be out fishing and I'll be catching a fish and I'll be doing something, and you tilt the rod and segments will start coming out. Plug. Pull the plug on the bottom that you've been saving up to put it back on the top. Once you've done that, now the rod can be twisted around and played however you like. So get familiar. That's tip number, I guess, 5 now. Get familiar with the rod. You don't need to connect the line to it right away. Get familiar with the rod itself. Understand that when you pull the plug, things can start sliding out. When you're opening, smallest segment first, working your way back towards the handle. When you're closing it, the exact opposite. Close the bigger segments in first. If you do not do that, segments will slide down in, get wedged, and you'll have a mess on your hands. The last part of this video is on the back of your Tenkara rod is a screw cap. Same applies. If you're going to remove that screw cap, don't be holding it downwards because everything's going to slide out. Tenkara rods are built from the back side, and they put the segments in proper order to build the rod, and they put this little screw cap on there. Why is it there? So you can replace a part should you ever break one, or maintain the rod. We talked about that a little bit ago. So tip number 6, I may have missed one in there, but tip number 6, these rods are getting dirty. They're getting dunked in water. You do not want to store them dirty. So get familiar before you do anything else with how a Tenkara rod works. Segments come out the back of the handle. So when you hold the rod parallel, this little screw cap comes off. When you tilt it, segments are going to start sliding out. So you'll see out of the back of this rod, there's all these individual segments that make up your rod. There is a backside and top side to every segment. So beware when you take segments out the back of the handle. There is a top side and a back side. Look at the segments, understand them. Typically on the back side of most segments, and it's kind of hard to see here, but there's unpainted, unfinished carbon fiber on most models. Some models may look a little bit different, but there's a top to bottom of each. So get your bearings straight on the segments as you take them out. Lay them out in front of you so you know what order they need to go back into the rod. So all these segments, right now, there's no more segments in this handle. I took them all out. They're all clustered together here. You can take them, most of them, singly apart. I'll take a couple apart here. So you've got now a whole bunch in this hand, one in this hand. To put it back in, just your eyes get old and they have a harder time seeing. Push them back in and you get a cluster. So you're building the rod slowly. All these segments can be taken out to be wiped off, cleaned off. Once they're nice and cleaned, no special detergents needed. Just wipe them off with a dry cloth. Keep them dry. If you need to run water over and through them because there's grit and grime, that's fine too. So run water over and through everything. And then build the rod back, smaller segments in through the back of the next bigger segment like you're doing here. See, this is the top. You'll see on the ukiyo, there's little bands here on most of the segments, little white bands. That is the top end. You do not insert the top end in through the top of another one. You're going to get segments wedged, stuck. So always inserting the smaller segment in through the back of the next bigger segment up. Hopefully that makes sense. And then you've got them all built up here. They need to now just go back into the back of the handle. You've cleaned them. You've dried them. Get the screw cap. Put it back on. And now you can store the rod. So it's important to maintain periodically these rods. That means just wiping them off, run water over and through them, and you're good to go. So let me get the screw cap back on this rod. And you can put it in your sock and back into the case. So very basics. Get familiar with the rod first. So this video is all about, you just received the rod, what now? I would say take it out of the case, get familiar with the plug, get familiar with the screw cap, get familiar with how the segments can come out the back of the handle should you ever need to replace anything. Or maintain the rod. If you go out and fish it a half a dozen times, things are going to get dirty. I typically like to clean my rod after every use, maybe every other use if you're going to store it for a long time, every use. That way you get home, clean them off, store the rod clean and dry. So that's it for this video. Just very basics, common sense. These are telescopic devices. They can get dirty. You'll want to maintain them. Plugs, Don't tilt the rod down if the plug's not in there to protect everything from sliding out. There's a proper order, opening the rod, smallest to the largest, and then closing it, exact opposite. Push the bigger ones in first, get the tip back in safely, put the plug on, clean the rod should you have to, store it clean. So that's it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I think next video we'll talk about, how about the basic castability of the rod? We're not even connecting a line yet. How does the rod work? Proper holding of the handle, where you can hold it on certain rods, and the proper casting stroke where you want your hand. Index finger is a common one for Tenkara rods, where you put your index finger on top and you're casting in such a manner versus a thumb on top, which by all means you can if you like to, but we like to do index finger on top, and it helps guide your targeted casts. So thanks for watching this video. Have a great rest of your 2024. We'll come back with another video not too long from now about, like I said, maybe proper handling of a rod. Once you've got it opened, what do you do now? What now? Thanks for watching the video. Bye.